I thought it might be worth our while for me to record the course logistics document so you have an idea as to how the course will run, assuming you weren't there yesterday, because you couldn't make it due to the unfortunate limitation, the cap on the number of participants. I will have that fixed by Monday's class, by the way. At any rate, but even if you were there, it might be useful to have the video again, just so you can remember what it is that I'm going to be expecting out of you in this course. Roughly speaking, this is the course description that shows up in the catalog. I've changed a few things around here, but not much. Like, it's just a few words have changed. First little bit, review of complex numbers, vector and scalar products, projections. That is meant to be something you've seen in your high school classes or the prerequisite classes. I'm going to briefly touch on the fundamental theorem of algebra. It's a very important theorem, very important result, but this isn't really the course to study the theorem and its consequences. Just mention that it exists because it has driven a lot of mathematical research and mathematical interests. The meat of the course, the bigger part of the course, the part that is the most likely to give you a headache, not that it should, but it could, is this bit here. Introduction to vector spaces, linear independence, and bases. It used to be that we would put this at the end of the course, but we found that when we did it this way, people would get lulled in a false sense of security because they had solved systems of linear equations. They had done a bit of matrix algebra. They might even have computed determinants. And they just really felt that this course was a continuation, or just a rehash of the prerequisite course. And it isn't. So by the time they got to vector spaces, linear independence, and bases, they had sort of, they hadn't put themselves in the right mental frame set to be able to understand the context. So the new approach at the university is to start right off the bat with these concepts. They're more complicated, but once you've gotten the hang of it, then a lot of what follows is substantially easier to understand than if we were just trying to rehash the prerequisites. Eigenvalues, eigenvectors, very important in applications. We'll get there eventually. We won't talk too much about them, but enough to introduce the concept so that when you do encounter them again in the applications, you're not going to be caught unaware or flat-footed. We'll briefly discuss orthogonality and the Gram-Schmidt algorithm, and eventually that will lead us to talk about linear transformations as general things. So an example of a linear transformation is multiplication by a matrix in ways that I'm going to describe shortly. It's not the only way, not the only linear transformation, and one of the things you'll see in your more advanced courses, though, is that matrix, well, multiplication by a matrix, constant matrix, basically is what linear transformations are all about, at least in finite dimensional spaces. At any rate, that's the description in the course catalog. In terms of the objectives, why you're taking this course and what we want you to get out of it, the first foremost objective is that you should get an understanding at a general level here of what linear algebra is about, so the concepts of linear algebra, but perhaps more importantly, the language of linear algebra, so that when you re-encounter it, when it really matters to you, because it is now applied to the specific topics of your field of study, then you're not faced with what seems like a completely different language. In a sense, this course is a grammar course. It's a course that teaches you how to speak linear algebra. While you're not going to go and read the most important work of literature in a new language that you're learning in your first year, right? You got to get to the point where you can eventually read the great works. This course is to get you to the point where you'll be able to do the equivalent of reading the great works. It is a requirement for a bunch of other courses. If you're studying mathematics, it is an absolute necessary component of, obviously, the later linear algebra classes, but also algebra classes in general, algebra courses in general, differential equations, regression analysis, for sure, as well. Okay, so for non-mathematicians, physicists, for instance, when you study differential equations again, right? But quantum mechanics is basically linear algebra. My name, Patrick Boily. You will be attending the lectures on Mondays and Wednesdays from 5:30 to 6:50. For now, I'm assuming it's still on Zoom, assuming that I can make it so that there's no cap on the number of participants. It is not impossible that I will switch to Teams if I can't fix the problem within Zoom. One way or the other, I will send you the links for the new lectures shortly on Slack. The discussion rooms start next week, so Wednesday, May 8th will be the first one. You've been assigned to a specific discussion group. There are 4 in total. You need to go to your specific discussion group. You can't attend the other lectures. You do not have to attend the discussion groups. You don't actually have to attend the lectures either. You'll get more out of the course if you do attend the lectures. I'm not going to lie about this. I've taught 75 university courses in my career, starting to be quite long here. I gotta tell you, with a few exceptions, like a handful of exceptions, students who attend tend to perform better than students who do not attend. Students who are engaged tend to perform better than students that are not engaged. Now, is it that students that attend are typically more serious students and perhaps that's why they perform better? That I can't tell you. But I can definitely tell you that in my experience, trying to figure it out on your own is not conducive to getting good grades, at least not in the courses that I teach. Which isn't to say it's impossible for you to do that, but I do strongly encourage you to attend the sessions, attend the lectures, and participate in class and on Slack. I don't have any official office hours because there are 250 students in this class, and if I was to try to select a slot or a spot, for sure 100 people would not be able to attend or to reach me there. Instead, we have a office hours channel on Slack. Once you've connected to Slack, you can ask questions there, or you can ask me questions by sending me a direct message, and I will anonymize the question and answer it in that channel. So I'll be checking Slack at least once a day during the term, and you can get your help that way. There's a textbook associated with this course. It's called Vector Spaces First. It's by Monica Nevins. She's a prof here at the department. You might have already taken a course with her. Most of what we cover, I'd say 98% of what we cover, comes from her textbook. So if instead of following along, you wanted to follow the textbook, you wouldn't be losing much in the way of content. 2 websites. There's the Brightspace website where I've posted some of the documents to start with. I'll put in there the bare minimum. Most of what we'll do will be on Slack. You have received an invitation in the introductory email that I sent, I think, 2-3 days before the start of term. It's also available in the announcement. Obviously, though, if you see this video, you've already accessed Slack because this is where I've posted the video. If you need to contact me, this is the place to contact me. Online or by email, 250 students. Look, I receive easily 300 emails a day. It is much too likely that I will just not see that you've sent me an email. You'll slip through the cracks. On Slack, that can't happen. So please use Slack. I will make recordings of the course material after each class. I'll make them available. The truth, though, is that they're pre-recordings. I've recorded the material already. And it's conceivable that I will say something in class that trumps what I've said in the pre-recordings. Well, what I say in class is more important than what I say in the recordings. But I'm not going to repeat myself. If you don't want to come, that's entirely okay with me. If you don't attend lectures or the discussion groups, I have no problem with that. But not if it makes me have to do more work. So if you come, questions, I can clarify things. If you're not there, and you want to know what it is you missed, well, either watch the recordings or ask your classmates, because I will not be repeating myself. Again, nothing personally wrong with repeating oneself, just there's 250 of you. And there's only so many times I can say the same things before losing my mind. In terms of the grading, there will be 3 tests, each worth 15% of your final grade. The dates are May 29th, June 24th, July 17th. These take place during the regular class hours. You have to be there. You have to be either Zoom or Teams. You'll have to be there, and you'll have to have your video feed on. Closed book, so you cannot access any of your notes. You cannot access any calculating devices. You are on your own for these tests. You'll each be getting a different test, a test that is customized. So, don't get caught with someone else's answers. That's not going to be a good look for you. The final exam is worth 55%, but now, and this is crucial and not my decision, this is an in-person exam. The date has been selected as July 26th by the faculty. It is not impossible that this date will change. Keep you abreast if it does change. The final exam is a closed book exam, but you'll be allowed to bring some simple calculating devices like handheld calculators, things without memory or without internet access. I will make those, I'll make a list available to you, but typically like the standard simple calculators allowed by the Faculty of Science and the Faculty of Engineering. If you're sick, if you've forgotten about the test, if you need some time off for mental leave or any other reason, well, if you miss the test, miss any test, you can just automatically transfer the weight to the final exam. I don't need a doctor's bill. I don't need an explanation. This will be done automatically. That also means that if you perform better on the final than you do on the tests, the grade of the final exam will replace the grade of the tests. 1, 2, 3, as many tests as you perform better on the final. Important note, the unspoken rule in the department is that if you fail the final exam, you fail the course. I feel it's perhaps a little rash, a little harsh. The way it's going to be set up, if you get below 20 out of 55, which you'll agree is a fairly low grade, all things being equal, you get below 20 out of 55, your final grade is an F. Can't help you. You need to at least perform well enough on the final to be able to say that you've passed the course. Now, if you study well and you do well on the test, it's unlikely that you will not get at least 20 out of 55 on the final exam, but I need you when I know for a fact that you're not using textbooks, devices, access to the internet. I need to know for a fact that you understand the concepts. If you get below 24 out of 55 on the final exam, which is still below failing grade on the final, you cannot get more than a D in the course. That's impossible. If you get below 27 out of 55 on the final, which is just a smidgen below a passing grade, your final grade will be at most C. Doesn't matter what you got on the tests. You could be coming to the tests with 45 out of 45. If you get less than 20 out of 55 on the final exam, your final grade is an F. Look at this little example here. Get 45 out of 45. You got 20 out of 55. Even though the computation should give you 65, you still get an F. The final exam will be at the same level of difficulty as the tests, but it is a synthesis of everything we've seen in the class. You need to have a reasonable grade on the final to be able to move on to the next course, because this course is often a prerequisite for other courses. And if it is there as a prerequisite, you need to have a basic understanding of the concepts. Otherwise, we're just delaying the time when you're going to have to sort of hit the brick wall. So we try to do it now. Very important, you cannot say that I didn't warn you about this. You have been warned. For the final exam, there is going to be, I'm going to provide you with a formula sheet, a cheat sheet. I'll show it to you before the exam. I still encourage you to create your own cheat sheets, your review sheets, because that's helping you study. But the idea of a review sheet or cheat sheet is that you should never be using it. It's not there to be used. It's there to study, to prepare yourselves. So that's something to keep in mind. You'll have access to certain things. One other thing I should mention, there are two dates. I believe it's May 20th and July 1st. These are statutory holidays in Canada. Unfortunately, the Monday class has to be pushed back to another day. It's pushed back to Saturday. I can assure you that there's not a single part of me that wishes to be teaching a course on a Saturday evening in the summers, but there we are. And the same goes for the discussion groups on the Monday. They'll be pushed back to the Saturday. I've given you these details on Slack. The final exam, as we've said, even though the courses are offered online, the final exams must be written in person. So you write them on campus on July 26th. If you're not going to be in Ottawa on July 26th, but you're somewhere else in the country, there is a list of approved exam centers. And so you can go and try to find that an exam center close to where you will be in Canada. If you're not going to be in the country, you don't have access to an approved exam center, you can't be in Ottawa on July 26th, your only other option will be to defer it to the fall study break in October. If you were sick the day of the exam, you'd do the same thing. I don't know how the deferral process works. This is something that's between the student and the faculty. But if you know that you're not going to be writing in person, you need to register for the deferral exam, and sooner than later, right? If you wait like the day after, that's not going to work. So you have to contact the faculty. There's apparently a link that gives you more information on this. I'll level with you. I clicked on that link and I visited the page, and I'm not finding any sort of super useful information. Perhaps you are better at navigating the university's website than I am. But for sure, you'll need to be in touch with the Faculty of Science if you want to do that. So it is an option that's open to you. I have to warn you that this option, the deferral, should not be used lightly. This is something that should only be used as a last resort. I've been teaching for about 25 years now. And I got to tell you, there's some legitimate reasons for people to get a deferral. They're sick. Something else happened in their lives. Some people get COVID, but other things can happen as well. Legitimate reason, and they still do as well 2 months later that they would have done when they studied. But for the most part, deferring is a mistake. If you have the ability to write when you're supposed to write it, it is entirely to your advantage to do so. Think about it. October 2024, it's about like midway through the month. You will not have studied or touched on linear algebra since July 26. If August, September, and part of 2.5 months removed from your actual course days in linear algebra, you will have had a bunch of other courses. Some of you will have started university, you'll be on campus for the first time. It's the study break. You're supposed to use that to study for your other courses. I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying in general, you should try to avoid doing it. My data says that typically when people get a deferred exam, half the time, a bit less, but roughly half the time, they don't even go to the deferred exam. And amongst those who do write the deferred exams, the average is substantially lower. The final average is substantially lower than those who actually wrote the exam when it was supposed to write. We're talking about like 12 to 15% lower, like potentially 3 letters below the grade. So yes, that option's open to you. Should not be something you use lightly. Only if the other 2 options are not going to work for you should you consider deferring that exam. We're worried about prerequisites. Look, in order to take this course, what you need is a passing grade in either MAT 1339 or an Ontario 4U Calculus and Vectors class. That would have been MCV 4U, or the equivalent for Quebec, I don't know what that is, or in other parts of the world, I don't know what it is. But in order for you to be here, you have at least the prerequisite and you've passed it. So you only need a passing grade, but the reality, and it doesn't just apply to this course, the reality is that whenever a course has a prerequisite, we are assuming that you have mastered the contents of a course. And there'll be a few times when I go over some stuff that you would have seen in these other courses, in the prerequisite courses. But more often than not, I'm assuming that you know exactly and entirely the content of the prerequisites. And the same thing goes here. It'd be great if you got a good grade in this course, but what's more important is that you understand it. You are better off with a B+ now and a good understanding, like an honest-to-goodness understanding that you can use 3 years from now when you take your quantum mechanics courses or 3rd-year linear algebra class, than you are with an A- or an A that you got just because you learned how to reverse engineer the questions when you got lucky on the final exam. Because people will assume that you master the prerequisite for their future courses. 1341. Go out and seek understanding, not grades. Let's talk a bit about the roles and responsibilities of me, the prof, and you, the students. My foremost responsibility is to prepare material and to present it in the form of slides, of videos, solutions. That's my #1 job. My #1 job is not to explain things. That's also part of my job, but it's not the first thing that I'm supposed to do. Presentation comes first, then comes from the student engagement, trying to understand, either through questions on Slack or working on exercises. When you try to understand, sometimes you will find yourself understanding, sometimes you'll find yourself not understanding, in which case you need to do something to try to bridge the gap. Well, you can come to me then for explanations. But you cannot come to me and say, I don't understand this. You need to show me, tell me what it is you do not understand. Okay? The explanations you get come after some effort on your part to try to understand. I'm fairly old school as far as these things go, but I have more than anecdotal evidence to suggest that you learn through struggling, through failure. You learn through not understanding. You do not learn through understanding. If you understand from the get-go, you haven't really understood, at least not as much as you could. In order to understand, you have to have not understood at some point. That's crucial. We'll try to set it up in such a way that your struggles, your failures, aren't really struggles or failures. Nobody here should feel bad or like less of a person because you didn't understand at first. Even if you don't get as good of a grade as you would have wanted here, it's meaningless. Just one course. You won't remember any of this at the end of the year, the end of your degree. After you retire, this isn't really a huge deal. Another thing that I'm not is a tutor. I am not a teacher. You'll say that's a bit odd. Yeah, a teacher and a professor, different things. I can guide you if you have problems with the prerequisites. I can guide you if you have problems with the course content. But I am not reteaching the material. I'm not representing it. That's important for you to understand. You have to do some of that work on your own. Thankfully, you do have options there for office hours. You have a drop-in center, which I'll discuss or talk about shortly as well. I'm there for the students who want to get the most out of the course. You'll find me answering questions. I will, like I said, I check my Slack every day. I will give you the guidance you ask for. If you're not somebody who wants to get the most out of the course, for whatever reason, good reasons or bad reasons, that's fine. It is actually not a problem. I can tell you as a student, I wasn't there to get the most out of all of my courses. In particular, if I had a course that wasn't an MAT course, could not care less about it. All the students that don't care are also allowed to be in the classes, and they're also allowed to get grades and passing grades, presumably. So I can't help you if you're not somebody who wants to get the most out of the course. But I've set things up in such a way that you'd have to work pretty hard to fail the course. Okay? For you as well, I want you to accept that you'll make mistakes. You will be making mistakes. Nobody does not make mistakes. If you don't make mistakes, there's something you haven't understood at some point. But I want you to learn from them, learn to overcome the struggle, overcome the difficulties, get from a point where you did not understand to a point where you understand better. Will you have full understanding? Probably not. It'd be surprising within 3 months for you to have achieved the nirvana of understanding, but you'll understand better. And this is something you can build on for your future courses. Also, and I mentioned it, but let me remind you, don't want you to worry too much about your grades. I've had some absolutely horrible grades as a student. It's okay. It's not fun. Fail 2 courses as an undergrad. Did not like that. Don't get me wrong. But it's not the end of the world. You learn an awful lot more when you're focusing on understanding rather than when you're focusing on your grades. Having said that, if getting good grades is a motivator for you, knock yourselves out. I've made some partially filled slide decks available on Brightspace. They're there on Slack as well. They're in PDF format. Basically, I'm expecting you to fill the holes during the class sessions. You can print them and write on them if you want. You can use a one of these little pens and write on the PDFs, whatever works for you. I've done this because you will not have the time to take notes from scratch. There's too much material. So I make the PDFs available in the first place, and basically I've filled in for you some of the stuff that isn't as important. In particular, whenever we do an example, here's the statement of the example, statement of the problem. The solution, then that's something you have to go and fill in yourself. I will not make the filled slide decks available. You can get them from the textbook. All the information is there if you must have the information. You can look at the pre-recordings, take screenshots if you want. But from a pedagogical perspective, it is preferable, and we have like evidence to suggest that that's the case, it is preferable for people to actually write to help engage your learning centers, your neurons that way. Right? Giving you a link there if you want to look at the study as well. Even typing is better than not typing. Being passive is the worst. Typing, you're at least active. But for whatever reason, we get more out of the courses if we're able to write some of this stuff down. So, you make this available to you, but because there's a lot to write, I don't think you should have to write everything. Don't ask me for the filled slides. You can literally set up a ring of people who will take screenshots of the videos if you want. That's completely fine by me. But they'll get more out of it if you handwrite some of the stuff down. In the discussion group sessions, I'm going to be suggesting exercises. Will provide you with solutions to some of them. The TAs will do some of the problems with you. And will also provide you with additional solutions to some of the other exercises that they will not do in the discussion group sessions. But there are going to be some exercises that will not have solutions, and I will not give you the solutions. About 80% of them you'll see solutions for, but you do not learn mathematics by being passive. You have to take on an active role. Don't ask me for these. It goes entirely against my teaching strategy to make these things available. A word on how I view exams. Look, in one term, you don't have a lot of time to really understand everything there is to understand. Like you're being drowned. There's tons of concepts, tons of definitions. You have other courses, you have labs, you have all of these things going on all at once. It might be absolutely ridiculous to ask you to master everything by the end of the term. See, from a student's perspective, an exam is a way to evaluate your performance. I mean, that sort of makes sense, but given that we're asking for performance evaluation after 3.5 months of work, it's not that meaningful of a tool. Like, from my point of view, what matters is that there's a good chance that you will eventually understand the key concepts. Eventually, some of these ideas, notions will have settled in to your brain and you'll be able to absorb them. Do you still remember the material 1 month later, 1 year later, 5 years later, in time for the next course? Right? So my view of exams is that not only do they allow me to evaluate your understanding, but they're also a vehicle for me to communicate what it is that you need to know before you can move on to the next step in your learning path. What you still need to study, even though there isn't going to be a grade given to you at the end of the process. My exams are always long, and they're always difficult-ish because I have to give you a list of the things that you really do need to understand. And so, I mean, I don't read my teaching evaluations like the public ones, but in the private ones, one of the things that I see is that why do I give such long tests? Why do I have so much work to do? And I do give a lot of work, and I do give long tests. Long tests. This is why. Having said that, I don't want to punish you when it comes to your final grade, right? So I set it up in such a way that if I need to bring up the grades at the end, assuming that you did pass the final exam, I will do so. I can tell you that amongst the students who stay in the class, who do not drop the class, my averages tend to be high C pluses, low Bs. Fairly good averages. But I also must tell you that I have a fairly high dropping out rate. I lose about 25% of students every term. That's okay. I'm sure these students would have done just as well if they had stuck around. But I think it's preferable for me to tell you right off the get-go that you can count on the exam being long and not being easy. Not hard, but I'm not making an exam easy just for the sake of it being easy. I'd much rather bring up the grades after if I need to do so. Word to the wise. Another thing I should mention, don't ask me to share past exams with the class. I will not do that. I don't want you to reverse engineer past exams. I want you to understand the concepts. Besides, I am convinced you can go online and find plenty of examples of past exams, especially exams from when we were doing everything online, like the COVID years. There is an online math drop-in center. There are some fairly specific steps to the procedure to use it. Please take the time to read what's written here. They cannot help you otherwise. The one thing that I will say is that the drop-in center does not have a mandate of explaining a whole section of a course. You need to come to them with specific questions, clear questions, an example of something you do not understand. And this, they also ask you to have your questions written, typed up, ready to share before the meeting starts because they don't have very long slots. So get the schedule, this is how you make appointments, tell them what course it's for, and so on. The expectations are at the university level that you'll spend between 135 to 150 hours a term on every course. That amounts to about 8 to 10 hours a week. If you take 4 or 5 courses, there's your like 50 hours a week. That's a lot of time. It's a full-time job. I know that a lot of you have to work as well. Some of you might have kids. Some of you might have family members to take care of, sports, you name it. Very important that you determine ahead of time whether you have the bandwidth to take the course. You might not be able to spend about 8 hours a week on this course. Well, 3 hours are spent in lectures, and that leaves about 5 to 7 on problems and review and trying to study for the tests and the final. It is much better for you to study throughout the term than to try to cram at a weekend before the tests. I say that, and I'm aware that most of you will cram. That's just the nature of the beast. You'll get a whole lot more out of this, and you will ultimately not have to work as hard if you study throughout, if you pace yourself. Just one course at the end, right? I said it's one course, one term, 1 year, 1 degree, 1 life. Don't lose sight of that. There's tons of things that are more important in this course, tons of things that are more important in schooling. We want you to do everything you can. Be sure you're physically and mentally healthy. You have people to take care of, and one of these people is yourself. If you can't write a test, you can't write a test. If you didn't do as well on a test as you wanted to, I promise you that this is not as bad as you think it is. I have written recommendation letters to students who do not have great GPAs, and they still got it to master's, PhD degrees. They still got into med school. They still got into these other things. Take it from somebody who was not the greatest student in history and who has seen basically all types of students. Engagement, focus on understanding and giving yourself the chance to underperform every once in a while will take you much, much further than stressing about your courses every second of every day. I'm not trying to take away your motivation. If you're somebody who really performs better when they are very stressed, sure, go ahead, do that. But life is short, and you're only young once, right? Let's keep the stress for things that are really worth stressing about. I'm not qualified really to help you or help anybody with mental health issues. And I don't know how much help you can actually get through these things, through these links. The university does make certain sites available. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Worst case scenario, I'll try to help you find somebody that can help you. A few other links. I want you to be aware of the issue of plagiarism and academic integrity. Please read this. You need to be aware of the consequences of plagiarism and cheating. This course is an absolutely ridiculous course to cheat on. It's not even a course about something that's super important, interesting to you. If you get caught cheating and you get kicked out of the faculty as a result, you'd be like, crap, that was a mistake. This course isn't worth it. I don't think any course is worth it, but this course in particular is not worth it. Please read the regulation. You need to be aware of the consequences. Some of you might require religious accommodations. I don't know the religious calendars. I don't know that the summer is necessarily, perhaps Diwali, I'm not sure. If you have religious accommodations, things that are required in terms of your the dates of the tests and the final exam, you need to make the university aware of this by a certain number of business days before you require the accommodations. If you go to them the day before, it's too late. They cannot help you. Please take a look at this and make the necessary arrangements if you need them. Academic accommodations also apply here if you're registered with SAS. And typically that will mean you get access to more time to write the exams. It's entirely not a problem. You need to be registered. I need to see you on Ventus. You might want to send me a DM, a direct message, so that I'm aware that you're going to require more time to write the tests. Online, the only difference is you get more time. In person for the final exam, you might also be allowed to write it in a separate, different room or isolated room depending on your requirements. But again, you have to get in touch with them now. If you wait halfway through the term, they might not have room for you anymore. So get on this as soon as possible. Make me aware of this as soon as possible if you think it's necessary. Important dates, deadlines, take a look at this. And well, there's the Wellness Center as well, if you want to know a little bit more about this. Last thing I'm going to say, look, I'm an old dude, been doing this for years, taught 75 courses. I think I've seen everything there is to be seen, and I'm probably right to some extent, at least when it comes to teaching. But having said that, I'm not here to gatekeep you out of your programs and from learning. I'm here to help you. So don't be intimidated. Roll up your sleeves. Ask for help if you need it. You can knock this out of the park. I promise you that this is easier than you think it is. Not just this course, but all of your other courses.